My own mother looked me in the eye and told me to leave. If you don't like it, get out. Your sister needs family support. Those words shattered something inside me. After everything I had carried, after all the years I thought I mattered, I realized in that instant I never did. My name is Georgiana Bell, and this is the story of what happened when I finally walked away. Her voice cut through the air sharper than any slap could. If you don't like it, then get out. Your sister needs family support. The words hung heavy, sinking into me with a weight I hadn't expected. I had been bracing myself for her usual jabs. But not this. Not the open dismissal of the life I had built within these walls. I froze in the old living room, surrounded by the framed photographs I had dusted for years, the furniture I had saved to buy, the house I had kept running when no one else would. 10 years of sacrifice, 10 years of being the steady one, the reliable one, and in a single sentence, I was reduced to nothing more than an obstacle in her eyes. It hadn't always been like this. When my father died so suddenly, the house felt like it had collapsed in on itself. Mom spent weeks barely able to rise from bed, and someone had to carry the weight. I gave up the chance to move to Dallas, gave up the stability and advancement I had been offered, because this home and her survival seemed more urgent than my own. I paid the mortgage, I kept the lights on, I held everything together because I thought that was what family meant. But Beatrice never lingered in the wreckage. She had her glamorous world in New York, drifting from one polished party to another, visiting only when it suited her. And still, despite her absence, she was the one Mom cherished, the one whose name always came laced with pride. That night, after her words pierced me, I sat in the same room I had lived in for a decade, and it felt unrecognizable. Every shadow seemed to whisper the same truth I had ignored too long. In this house, in her heart, I had never been the chosen daughter. The door swung open, and there she was, draped in a designer dress that sparkled under the hall light. Beatrice carried herself with the same old poise, but behind the polish, her face looked drawn, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. Kyle followed at her side, silent, his gaze fixed on the glow of his phone, barely lifting his head as if the room bored him. Mom rushed forward, as though royalty had arrived. The kitchen was filled with the smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread. Flowers stood in vases on the counter, their petals spread wide like a stage curtain. Her smile was wide, her laughter nervous and bright, as though she was trying to prove something. I slipped quietly into a chair at the edge of the table, watching the scene unfold as if I were a neighbor dropping by, not the person who had kept this house alive for a decade. The plates clattered, wine was poured, and Mom leaned toward me with a casual tone that cut sharper than any argument. "You can move into the small room by the garage. Beatrice needs her old room back." The words landed like a verdict. My throat closed up, my pulse thudded in my ears. But I didn't argue. I simply stared at the tablecloth, willing myself not to break in front of them. Dinner went on as though nothing had happened. Beatrice laughed at something Kyle muttered. Their plates filled with food, Mom served them first. I sat with my hands in my lap, the taste of ash in my mouth, feeling the borders of the family I thought I belonged to shift and push me out. By the end of the meal, it was clear. They were home, and I was the outsider. Late one night, I opened the desk drawer where the house deeds were kept. My father had once promised the property would remain for both of us, a shared legacy. But as I scanned the document, my name was gone. Only Mom's remained, written in black ink as the sole owner. My chest tightened. The ground beneath me seemed to tilt. When I confronted her the next morning, she didn't even flinch. "You don't need it. This house should belong to the family, and your sister is the future," she said, her voice smooth, dismissive, as though what she erased was nothing more than a pencil mark. I stumbled back, unable to breathe. Later that evening, as I passed the hallway, I caught fragments of Kyle's voice through the thin walls. He was on the phone, his tone hushed but urgent. "We just need more time. The creditors are pressing. We'll figure something out." The truth hit me like a flood. They hadn't returned because of love or family ties. They had come back running, from debt, from failure, seeking shelter in the very house I had been holding up all these years. That night, I lay awake in the cramped room by the garage, listening to the faint sound of laughter echoing down the hall. I curled beneath the blanket, realizing with a hollow ache that I wasn't the daughter who belonged here anymore. I was just a tenant in the home I had kept alive. The changes started small, almost easy to miss. First, the washing machine was gone, then the refrigerator. Weeks later, the sofa vanished from the living room as though it had never been there. Each absence carved a hollow into the house I had worked so hard to fill. When I asked, Beatrice only offered a casual smile, twirling her hair as if it were nothing. "Kyle sold it. Don't worry. We'll get better things later." Her words rolled off her tongue like reassurance, but all I heard was dismissal. My stomach clenched. These weren't just objects. They were the hours I had worked, the overtime shifts, the weekends sacrificed. I checked the joint savings account that was supposed to cover property taxes. The balance blinked back at me, nearly empty. My chest tightened as if the floor had tilted beneath my feet. When I confronted Mom, she waved a hand, her tone sharp and impatient. "I used it. Don't ask questions." Later that evening, through the kitchen window, I saw Kyle in the driveway, slipping a thick envelope of cash into his jacket, handed over by a man I didn't recognize. He looked over his shoulder before heading back inside, the smirk on his face leaving a knot in my throat. By the time night fell, I understood what was happening. The house I thought I had anchored was unraveling, plank by plank, like a boat springing leaks faster than I could patch them. The memory came to me suddenly. My father locking away papers and savings in a steel safe out in the storage shed. He once told me it was for security, for the family's future. That night, heart-hammering, I found the key he had given me years ago and slipped into the dark shed. The safe opened with a creak, but inside there was no comfort, just a handful of brittle papers and, on top, a yellowed tuition invoice with Beatrice's name scrawled across it. The insurance payout, the savings account. All of it was gone. I carried the documents inside, my hands trembling, and placed them in front of Mom. Her face remained composed, almost cold. "I used it for your sister, her schooling, her car. When Kyle needed a startup loan, you're fine, you have a job, you'll manage." The words sliced through me, sharper than the truth itself. It wasn't just about money. It was about what I meant to her, what I had always meant. Not a daughter to be invested in, not someone worth protecting, just the one expected to hold everything together, while the favored child soared and squandered. As I closed the safe again later, the metal door groaned like a final judgment. For the first time in years, a thought rose in me, clear and unshakable. I didn't have to stay. And this time, I knew if I left, I would never come back. I stood across from her, my hands still trembling from the weight of the empty safe I had opened hours before. She didn't flinch. Her voice came even, almost cold, as though she had rehearsed it 100 times. "I just wanted to give your sister a chance. You're fine. You didn't need that money." Her words hit harder than any scream. Years of sacrifices, property taxes, roof repairs, endless bills, were stripped of meaning with one casual dismissal. Then she went further, her chin lifted with a pride I couldn't understand. "This house is mine. The deed is in my name. You have no claim here." The air left my lungs. Every check I had written, every hour I had spent propping up this place, was erased with that single sentence. As I tried to steady myself, movement outside the window caught my eye. Kyle was slipping more of the furniture into the back of his car, shutting the trunk quickly before anyone else could see. He glanced around, then walked back in like nothing had happened. The bulge of cash obvious in his jacket. It struck me then, like ice in my veins. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a trap, one designed to drain me until there was nothing left. If I stayed, I would lose more than furniture and savings. I would lose myself. That night, I sat at my desk, the glow of the laptop screen reflecting the tears I refused to shed. My fingers typed steadily as I filled out the application for the job in Dallas I had once turned down. When I hit submit, it felt like a door opening I had never allowed myself to see before. A week later, the moving truck rumbled into the driveway. The men glanced at the piles of boxes I had packed neatly by the door. Surprised by the sheer amount, I directed them calmly, piece by piece, my coffee maker, my desk, my bed, my shelves. Each item I carried out felt like reclaiming a part of myself. One of the movers finally paused, wiping his brow, and asked with a half grin, "You're really taking it all?" I met his eyes without hesitation. "Yes, every bit of it is mine." By late afternoon, the house stood stripped bare. The echoes of our footsteps rang through the empty rooms, bouncing off walls that had once held laughter and arguments, dinners and silent nights. Now it looked like nothing more than a husk, a carcass of what had once passed for a home. That evening, Mom and Beatrice returned. Their gasps filled the hallway before the shouting began. Mom's voice shook with fury. "What have you done? The house is empty." I looked her in the eye, steady as stone. "I only took what belonged to me." For the first time, I saw it register. Beatrice's wide-eyed stare, Mom's pale face, the realization that every comfort they had enjoyed had been held up by me. Without me, there was nothing but 4 cold walls. I set the keys on the counter, turned, and walked out. The door shut behind me with a quiet click, final and unyielding. As I drove away, the rearview mirror caught the silhouette of the lake house fading into darkness, shrinking into nothing more than a memory I was finally free to leave behind. The silence in the house after I left was deafening. Without the hum of appliances or the weight of furniture, the walls seemed to groan under the emptiness. Bills piled up on the counter, the property tax notice still unopened, its red letters a warning no one could ignore. What once felt like a home now resembled an abandoned shell, a hollow reminder of what they thought was secure. Beatrice's composure cracked first. She stormed into the kitchen, her voice sharp and raw. "You told me the insurance money was still there. You promised we'd be fine." Her words rang against the bare walls, desperate and accusing. Mom's face went pale. She stammered, her hands shaking as she gripped the edge of the counter. I thought we could manage. But that money, it's been gone for years. I spent it. All for you." The confession hung in the air, suffocating, undeniable. Beatrice's scream sliced through the stillness, a sound caught between fury and heartbreak. Kyle, who had been pacing for days, finally snapped. He grabbed a single suitcase, muttered something about not drowning with them, and slammed the door behind him, his car roaring down the driveway into the night. Left alone, mother and daughter turned on each other, voices raised, accusations flying, every lie, every favoritism, every broken promise spilled out. Years of resentment combusting in a single evening. And as they stood in the ruins of their illusions, the lake house itself mirrored their downfall. Stripped bare, riddled with debt, it stood as nothing more than a carcass, proof that the foundation of their lives had always been built on sand. When I stepped back into the house, the air felt heavier than ever. The kitchen was dim, only one bulb burning above the table. My mother sat slumped forward, her forehead pressed against her folded arms, the way she used to rest when exhaustion overcame her. Across from her, Beatrice sat rigid, eyes swollen and red, her hair disheveled, her hands gripping the chair as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. The moment they noticed me, Mom pushed herself up and rushed toward me, her face streaked with tears. She clutched my arm with a desperation that made my skin prickle. "Georgiana, you're the only one who can save us. Please, help me one last time." Her voice cracked on the word last, like she knew there might not be another chance. I set my bag on the counter and unzipped it. Without a word, I drew out a thick envelope and slid it across the table. They stared at it as though it might contain salvation. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for it, but when she opened it, only receipts spilled onto the wood. Property taxes paid, roof repairs covered, all stamped with my name. I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. I kept this house alive for years. Every month, every crisis. I was the one who made sure it stood. But it's not my responsibility anymore. You and Beatrice chose this path, not me. Beatrice shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. You're abandoning her. After everything, you're just walking away. You're selfish. Her voice shook with fury, but underneath it was fear, naked and sharp. I met her glare without flinching. I gave up my 20s for this place. I gave up opportunities, stability, happiness. I didn't abandon her. She abandoned me the moment she erased me from this house and welcomed you back like a savior. Don't you dare call me selfish. The words cracked through the room, silencing them both. For the first time, the truth stood unmasked. Every scrap of security they had leaned on had been mine. Every bill paid, every roof that didn't leak, every light that turned on. It had all come from me. And now that I was gone, so was the illusion they had built their lives on. Mom's face crumpled, her mouth opening but no words coming. Beatrice's fury faltered, leaving her standing with clenched fists and wide, empty eyes. They had nothing left to argue with, no more lies to hide behind. I lifted my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked toward the door. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint sound of Mom's uneven breathing. My hand closed over the doorknob, cool and solid, and I pulled it open. For a moment I paused, the weight of years pressing against my back. Then I stepped forward, letting the door fall shut behind me. The latch clicked into place with a sharp cash, final and absolute. It was more than the sound of a door closing. It was the sound of chains breaking, of years of burden sealing themselves away. I knew, without looking back, that something inside me had finally ended, and something else had finally begun. A year passed, and life had reshaped itself in ways I once thought impossible. My days no longer revolved around putting out fires that weren't mine. I lived in a modest apartment in Dallas, sunlight streaming through clean windows, the silence broken only by the hum of the city below. The promotion I'd taken had settled me into a role I once dreamed of, but never allowed myself to claim. I was now the head of the finance department, responsible, respected, and finally secure on my own terms. Meanwhile, the echoes of the lake house had crumbled into reality for the two who stayed behind. Mom and Beatrice lost the home within months, the unpaid taxes and mounting bills forcing them to sell at a loss. The house that once stood as their pride was now someone else's. They ended up in a cramped apartment on the outskirts of town, their voices no longer carrying the same authority. Beatrice took a part-time job at a bakery, her once manicured hands now dusted with flour. Mom found work as an administrative assistant at a dental clinic, her days filled with filing paperwork and answering phones. Kyle had long since disappeared, leaving behind nothing but silence and unanswered calls. One morning, as I sat in a cafe tucked on the corner of a busy street, I opened my father's old notebook of financial lessons, its pages worn but steady in my hands. Steam rose from the cappuccino in front of me, the taste warm and rich on my tongue. For the first time in years, I breathed without the weight of someone else's burdens pressing against my chest. A smile tugged at my lips, unforced, quiet, entirely my own. They had believed I was a burden, but the truth was undeniable. I had been the foundation all along. When I walked away, their world collapsed, and in that collapse, I found something far more valuable than their approval. I found myself.